All right, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the April 16th, 2020 meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee at 7 p.m. and we are holding this on Zoom tonight. This meeting is being audio and video recorded and all of the attendees are participating remotely. I need to make sure that all of the attendees can both hear everything that's going on in the computer and that we can hear you. So I'm just going to go down the list of names, and if you could confirm that you can hear and that and obviously we'll all be able to hear you, that would be appreciated. So Maureen?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, Erin?
I can see and hear you.
Awesome. Paul Goldner?
I can see and hear.
Paul Lees?
Yeah, I can see and hear.
Awesome. Who else am I missing? Tina?
I can see and hear.
And Tina. Sorry, Tina. Deb?
Yes, hear and see.
All right, and that should be it. All right. I keep forgetting to do this because we've got so much at the beginning of our meetings now, but I'm going to read aloud the vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. All right, so I have no remarks since we just met a mere week ago. So I'm going to move straight on then to oral communications from the public. And seeing no public.
I can confirm there's no public in the queue.
Yeah. We do have two topics on the agenda tonight. One of them is the audit, which Kyle Warren is going to go through shortly. The other one is the executive session. Just for, in case you didn't read the emails, what's going to happen is Kyle is going to do the audit in open session. We're going to vote to go into executive session. Brian's going to turn the host controls over to me. Everyone who is attending the executive session will actually exit the meeting and go to the separate executive session. I'm going to hold this one open. So this is where you're going to come back to using that original meeting link. You're going to come back to this meeting afterwards, and I'm going to have held that open, and then we'll reopen it. Maureen will take over so that you can go through the results of the executive session, and then we'll close from here. So a little bit complicated, but I think we're good. And Erin and Deb are the other two people who cannot participate in the executive session. So you're welcome to hang out here with me if you want. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun.
Narissa,
Well, I lost you.
it's going to be fun. So just to confirm, I'm going to pause the recording. So after you vote to go into executive session, I'll pause the recording and then transfer it to you, and then whoever's remaining to keep the meeting open is not part of the video that will get to the website, I hope. And
I mean, technically, anything we say at that point is still part of an open meeting, so I don't think we're going to be talking all that much.
There it is.
That's the theory.
I can't find the button. I can't find the button that says wave my hand. So
It's okay. There's only a few of us.
Should we just keep our screen open, or to be here when you come back?
Yeah, it's up to you. If you want to hang around for when they come back from executive session, that's what I'm going to do. You can hang around here. You can turn your screen to black and go wander away and just listen to the audio. Mute yourself or whatever you want during that time. If you don't want to hang out and hear the end of it, you don't have to do that either, because we have plenty of people for a quorum. So if you have something, pressing to do tonight, we totally understand that you don't want to hang out for the executive session.
Yeah,
this is the first meeting I've ever had where I sat and ate jelly beans during the meeting. So there you go.
I thought you were eating grapes. I was going to give you credit for being
jelly beans.
All right.
I was going to say, so it's not the three of you, as it's the final public vote. The three of you who can't vote can still be present for that vote. Yes. You just can't take a vote. So
right. So we'll abstain from that when the time comes. But yes.
Okay.
All right. So that said, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle so that he can go through the audit, which is, and apologies, Kyle, we had to put you off from the last meeting. That was the one thing that we didn't get a chance to cover in the agenda. So you get a meeting practically all of your own. Look at it that way.
I am flattered.
No, great. Thank you. So 3 documents before you tonight. The basic financial statements, the schedule of federal awards, and the management letter. All 3 of these are the product of the district's FY 2019 audit. This was performed by Roselli and Clark, a CPA firm out of Woburn. And just to give you a little background on that process, their team came in the fall, started field work, and what they're charged with doing is taking a look at our underlying accounting records. So what they do is they verify all of the individual balance sheet accounts, and then they select a sample of transactions for testing purposes, receipts, invoices, payrolls, that type of thing. And as part of that process, they didn't find any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. They did have a list of suggestions that's in our management letter, but in terms of the underlying accounting records, they had no proposed adjustments, which means the reports that are being provided to finance subcommittee and the school committee on a monthly basis, those can be relied upon. Jumping over to the basic financial statements, I'll start with those first, then go to the federal awards report, and then lastly the management letter. All 3 of these reports were reviewed in detail or a draft of the reports at the February Finance Subcommittee meeting. So I'll give an abbreviated review of the 3. Looking at
Kyle, I put them in the packet in a different order. So it's actually Annex 2 are the statements that you're speaking about first, and then Annex 3, and then back to Annex 1, the management letter.
Perfect.
Okay,
and I can get a little excited about these things, so don't be feel free to interrupt at any point with questions. I'll
keep them honest, everyone.
Yeah.
I live with one of those, so I understand.
That's right. I was going to say. I believe
I'm
your
sorry,
phrase
Brian,
is
what annex
you'll start
did you say
geeking
was-
out on this stuff. So the financial statements are Annex 2. That's the first piece I think you said you want to talk about, Kyle. And then
Correct.
you'll go
Yep.
to the grant, the federal awards. That's
Correct.
Annex 3. And then Annex 1 is the cover letter.
Perfect.
That'll be the third thing he talks about.
Excellent. So Annex 2 with the financial statements. Reviewing these, there's 3 different levels of financial statements, or actually 3 separate statements. I like to start in the back, which is the budgetary statements, and the second to last page of the report details the budget to actual results for FY 2019. There's separate columns for the final amended budget, the actual budgetary results, and the differences between the 2. At the top, it details the revenues separately. So of the $43.5 million in estimated revenues for FY 2019, we came just about on target, 8,000 under. So when you look at the totality of that figure to come that close, pretty good there. And then on the appropriations side of things, details a couple of different line items. But when you look at the appropriations as a whole, at the end of the year, there was $122,000 of unexpended appropriations. I think it's helpful to look at that figure as a percentage of the total appropriations, and that's just under 0.25%. So you can see how close we get to that figure. There's not a lot of extra buffer built into the FY 2019 budget. And then when all is said and done, at the end of the year, the fund balance of the general operating fund increased $72,000 for a year-end balance of $417,000. Looking at that balance, that 417 is directly correlated with our E&D that's certified by the state every year. Again, looking at that as a percentage of the total operating budget is helpful, as a helpful metric. And that was just under 1%, or 0.95% of the total operating budget for FY19. When we look at our bond rating, that's a big factor, and actually a factor that led to the downgrade a couple years back. That the rating agencies themselves, when they're looking at cities and towns, they actually recommend a 10 to 15% reserve level. So some work can be done there. Certainly there are challenges for school districts. It's different than cities and towns to a degree. But when we get over to the management letter in a little bit, looking at the economic outlook of the district and some reasons for that downgrade, those reserve levels are certainly a critical factor contributing to the financial state of the district. Next, moving to the next level of the financial statements, the GAAP statements or the fund-based. You have the general fund. It's just repeating the information on that budgetary statement, as well as a separate column. Yeah, Paul.
Kyle, can you direct us to pages in the annex? Is that possible?
I would love to, absolutely. So
Thank you.
that budget to actual was the second to last page, 43 of 44 that I just went over. That's the operating results. And then the next level of financial statements, again, kind of working from the back of the report to the front is helpful. Those GAAP statements are on page 12 of 44. Let me go to that real quick, just to make sure, because it gives you a balance sheet and a P&L at that fund-based GAAP level. Yeah, so there's the page 12 is your balance sheet. And you can see there's separate columns, one for the general funds that mirrors the budgetary statement in the back. And then you have non-major governmental funds that includes your state and federal grants, as well as the district's revolving funds as well. At year end, the non-major governmental funds had a year-end balance of $684,000. All those funds are restricted for particular purposes, whether it be the special ed, IDEA, various revolving funds like school lunch, things of that nature. And then the last level of the financial statements moving forward is going to be on page 10, your statement of net position. That's all your GAAP statements, and then they layer on your long-term assets and long-term liabilities. Of particular note here are the long-term liabilities. Actually on page, we flip pages a little bit. On page 13, it gives a more detailed level of the individual assets and individual liabilities. But two that I'd like to highlight are the net pension liability, which at year end was $12.9 million. That's our obligation for pension benefits over at Essex Regional Retirement Systems, our non-teaching staff. For that, there's a set funding schedule, which we pay the bill for every year. And then the other one is the OPEB liability, which is certainly the talk of the town everywhere. For us as a district, it came in at $85.9 million at year end. That was an increase of $8.6 million over the prior year. Some factors that contributed to that increase were changes in actuarial assumptions like mortality tables, the discount rate or the assumed investment rate of return was decreased. It's worth highlighting, though, that liability was calculated using data as of July 1st, 2018. And since that point in time, the district had significant plan revisions for the health insurance provided to active and retired individuals. So I would expect in the next valuation, which will be completed July 1st, 2020, we would see a decrease in the liability there, barring any other mortality table assumptions, changes like that.
Kyle, can I ask on the for the net pension liability, that's all Essex County or Essex Regional, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So when we're paying, and we obviously talk about this every year, our payments each year have gone up substantially some years. So that's a set schedule approved through PERAC. It's right. We're actually paying that down to the point where it's going to be fully funded. I believe is it 2035 or something like that, 2034? So
exactly.
That our payments that we're making every year, and so if we call it 2035, another 15 years, that liability gets paid down to zero. And then you've heard this discussion where it's over $1 million now. I think it increased
Right.
30 some odd thousand just this year alone. The discussion that we've had all along is when that liability goes away, because we'll have fully funded it, we then would transition that $1 million that we're currently paying to Essex County over to our own OPEB, which is then decreasing our own individual liability. So just to make sure there was a connection between the two, we've had those discussions over the years. But that's a potential, really the first kind of window where we could put a dent in our own OPEB.
Right. Yeah. Especially for us as a regional school district, we have a lot more challenges financially than, I want to put this in the right way, but to accumulate a balance there in the OPEB fund through free cash versus our E&D as a district, it can be challenging. So there is definitely the discussion there of, even though it's far off in the future, shifting that appropriation, that pension appropriation over to OPEB once the pension fund is fully funded is a very prudent financial policy.
Great.
And you were mentioning too, that bill has been going up every year. There's factors contributing to that. You would think it should just go down, but it's susceptible to market volatility, as also the assumed investment rate of return that was factored into that liability. It used to be about 8%, which was high. Now, as a group, all of the retirement systems have been moving that assumption downward. I think they're at about 7. They're at 7.5 now. So as you assume you're going to be making less investment income, that's going to increase your liability. Also, people are living longer and salaries are going up. So all those factors.
Great. Thank you.
And then for OPEB, you look at the calculation of that liability, not legally mandated to set aside money right now, but when you look at the credit rating agencies, they're also asking, what's your plan? Even if you can't do much, if you have a policy saying each year we're going to set aside 10% of our increase in E&D over to OPEB, that type of thing, that'll all help the financial outlook of the district. I know a very quick and abbreviated version of all those components, but any questions? OPEB, operations, anything like that?
Paul? Can you unmute, or can
Yep.
Brian?
So,
Yep, there.
Brian, I don't know if this is you or Kyle, but can you explain why it is that we pay down the Essex County exposure before we address ours?
So that's a retirement. So that's the equivalent of the Mass Teachers Retirement System at the state level. So anyone with a professional level license, so administrators, educators, teachers, we pay into Mass Teachers Retirement System. So we pay our 11% of our salary. The state matches that 11%. So that's one system for, because that's at a state level, the state is kicking in the 11%, but that's a set funding schedule. The same is the case with Essex, used to be Essex County, now it's Essex Regional Retirement System, except for we're paying that matching 11%. So we're paying the matching for the pension, whereas OPEB is medical benefits.
Right.
So it's a different category, and it's just, luckily, I mean, I can't imagine if we were also paying the 11% to match teachers' salaries, that it would be, I mean, there's a reason it doesn't exist, because it would be unsustainable. But
right.
Yeah, so that's because of the fact that it's a pension, which is a fixed funding versus medical benefits.
And in the back of the report, actually, so Mass Teachers Retirement System, there should be a schedule. On page 40 of 44, it gives the liability associated, the district share of the liability for providing pension benefits to teachers that the Commonwealth is picking up. the tab for. So you can see there for just teachers, as of the 2018 measurement date, it was $23.7 million liability that the Commonwealth is on the hook for. The district is not.
And the 1.3 is their annual contribution.
Correct.
Huh?
One more really stupid question. So the 85.9 million is only for health insurance?
Correct.
So that's again going back to the mortality table. So that's assuming everyone that currently exists on through all existing retirees, assuming an average lifespan. That assumes the total cost. If we were to close up shop, we would have to have that amount of money to ensure that everyone that exists today has health insurance for life as guaranteed in Mass statute.
And something, not to go too far into the schedules again, but on page 41 of the financials, it gives a breakout of the change in the liability from one year to the next. And you can see for 2019, the 8.6, the first column there, the $8.6 million increase, 3.1 of it is interest. So because we're not paying down the liability, and then 11.6 million increase was due to changes of assumptions. So mortality tables, things like that. But this figure, it's so heavily reliant on the discount rate or the assumed rate of return, investment return. It has I think it's like a 3.8%. We only have $10,000 set aside for OPEB right now. If we had a more aggressive funding schedule or a set plan policy, they would allow us to have a higher assumed rate of return. I've seen, maybe like ultimately even a 7.5 if we had a real significant funding schedule. So that liability would come way down by just increasing the assumed investment rate of return. So it's a very volatile number right now.
I mean, so it's a chicken and egg, right? So there's as much benefit to just committing to funding it as it is just the balance that's accruing within the OPEB trust.
Perfect way to put it. Absolutely.
All right.
Any other questions on the financials? Okay.
He's here all night, folks.
So next, Annex 3. This is the schedule of federal awards. It details all of our expenditures of federal grants, just like it's titled. On page 6 and 7 of this report, it details out the individual grant awards and the total amount expended. You can see right at the top, our more significant programs are school lunch, that's financed through the USDA, and then the special education cluster through the U.S. Department of Ed. This is a separate audit performed by Roselli and Clark. Each year they have to select a major program to audit against compliance requirements. So this year for FY 2019, they selected the special education cluster, which is the IDEA grant, and then the preschool grants as well. From that, they did have one finding this year, which is shared with a number of other cities, towns, and school districts. Basically, the state comes out with a letter each year certifying that you're able to spend down the grant. And this year, that letter was delayed. The state sent it out late. However, because of our budgeting purposes and having everything set up, we began spending down that grant before that letter was sent out. So because of that, certain expenditures were deemed to be outside the period of allowability. Again, this was shared by a number of other communities. Looking towards resolving this, going forward to this year, we won't have the issue. We'll just make sure to, it's noteworthy that we used to spend charge salaries against the special education cluster grants. Now we charge out of district tuitions. So it's a lot easier to manage and we get a greater bang for your buck, so to say. So we'll just make sure to that doesn't occur again. But yeah.
So
Pardon?
we've done this in the past, and we keep being naughty, and we would do it again because the reality is the federal grant schedule doesn't follow the regular school schedule. So if we have an entitlement grant coming to us, and we know it's coming, and we have the award, they just haven't processed the paperwork, we're going to spend the money because we have to. So as much as Kyle's being a good doobie and saying, you know, and it's every district would have the same finding because it's the reality of the nature of the way that DESE doles out the grants and their timeline. So specifically over the past couple of years, as the Department of Ed has suffered, they're doing great things. I will say that the folks that are in the place now are working their tails off, but they suffered a 40% of their total staff that retired with the early retirement. And so, you know, things that used to take 2 weeks were taking 2 months. And if we're waiting on a $750,000 grant, and we know it's coming, you know, we kind of got to move forward with making that assumption. But as Kyle said, it becomes a non-issue since we've taken salaries out and put
especially too, you look at what you can charge against that grant, that we have a plethora of costs that we could charge to that allowable period if they came and asked us to file an amendment type of thing. So yeah, ditto to what Brian said. That's pretty much it for the schedule of federal awards. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Moving on to Annex 1, the management letter. So again, as part of the audit process, they did not, in all the testing that was performed by Roselli and Clark, they did not find any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. They did put together in this report a list of suggestions. Starting at the beginning, they outlined the comments as the first set of comments as informational items. First, detailing the economic outlook, which we've hit on just about all of those points already, where it's suggesting that we work to improve our stabilization funds, our reserve levels, and also the OPEB trust balance. And all of this feeds into our bond rating, which as we move towards a capital plan, which will be presented in the future, with the need to finance that, our bond rating becomes especially important. So we'll want to address those issues. Other informational comments, OPEB, hit on that pretty well, as well as network security. I think every community in Massachusetts has this informational comment with the schemes that are out there right now. The auditor did note that our IT department is a well-oiled machine. We hit on all the different areas that they suggest are important. One area that they would like to see is that we have a outside consultant perform a assessment of our IT infrastructure, which is very valid. So Deb Jones, our IT director, and I will be talking about that one. SEC regulations, just informational, a new regulation there relating to our leases. We've talked with our financial advisor, making sure we satisfy all those requirements. GASB pronouncements, these are all financial statement based. So those will be worked into future financial statements. And then other observations, there's the student activities comment, which has been in there for a few years. We had a separate audit performed over student activities. Strides have been made there. A little bit left to go in terms of getting QuickBooks up and running. But so that's a work in progress. We had initially planned to have the auditor come back this spring to help with some trainings, but that's going to be postponed. But we'll make sure to complete that one. Treasurer's office, that was resolved this year fully, the prior recommendation. Then the athletic office, the auditors had done a site visit over there, came up with a list of recommendations, best practices type of thing. So that's partially resolved. And then Tim Alberts and I will be working on making sure we address those remaining comments. And then finally, school lunch review. I'll quote our auditor as saying it's one of the best operations he's ever seen. No areas mapped out for needing improvement there. So it was just, he felt it necessary to highlight the things that he observed because he had spent time over there.
And I should note on good timing, early, it was like 4 o'clock today, there's a routine, I think it's monthly or quarterly newsletter that comes out from the Department of Ed, Food Services, statewide. And I included you on the newsletter that I forwarded out to the whole staff because Lucinda and the crew were highlighted in pictures and just a little snapshot about what they've been doing to serve 4,000 meals a week to our students. So just a shout out, not just from I think that we have the perfect storm in Lucinda in that visionary and creative and managing a program that does amazing things for kids, but also, like Kyle said, to also have the auditor come in and say, from an operational and a financial perspective, to have that so solid as well is absolutely phenomenal. So she's absolutely amazing, to quote Kim in the chat. So I was going to note, I don't know if you can see the questions, Marissa, but Tina has her hand raised. Tina from Raleigh,
yes.
you're live.
Can I ask Kyle a question?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, great. How long does it take to upgrade our bond rating, similar to, in 6 months, if you pay off your credit card bill, your credit score might go up a few points in terms of trying to create a better schedule for saving and putting money into OPEB for strategically planning? Like if the next 2 to 3 years you fund it consistently, whatever, will that guarantee that we'll get a better bond rating in that time? So if we go for something.
I follow you. Yeah, it would be relatively quick. There's 2 components to our bond rating. There's the rating itself, and then they also placed a negative outlook on the district as well. That negative outlook was relating to our use of E&D to finance operations on an annual basis, which we've, in next year's budget, that's not built in there right now. And I'd even like to have the discussion with the rating agency too, whereas in FY19, we had planned on using E&D at the end of the year to play it safe. But then we didn't end up needing to use it at all. If you look at our E&D levels from FY18 to FY19, they went up from 280,000 to 417,000. So there was an improvement there. So I think once they see that the general practice of using E&D to finance operations has gone away, and then the steps to budget appropriately, the policies in place, the views of management, that type of thing, I think that negative outlook has a big factor on it, and that could go away quick. And then the next component would be our reserve levels. And that would, once we work to improve those, that would have an impact on the rating itself, which can take a little bit more time, but the negative outlook, I believe, I'd have to look into it a little further, but that has the biggest hit on what our interest rates would be. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else?
Brian, you're muted.
Sorry, I was going to say, I'm so worried about everyone else, I forget when I mute myself.
It's a good thing that Brian talks with his hands.
Oh yeah, this is being recorded. Crap. So I was going to say, so the negative outlook is a short-term look, right? So it's saying that's why it has such a bad hit on the rates, is because it's saying right now your practice is we're making decisions that aren't addressing our problem. That's the negative outlook. The rating itself is based on actual balances and all of that, but the negative outlook being we're able to change that more quickly, but it also has a more direct impact, like you said, on a bond rating if we went out to borrow, because it's reflecting the decisions we're making currently.
And they love policies too. So if we came up with a policy that said, 10% of our increase in E&D is going to go over to this stabilization fund.
Yep.
Adopting a stabilization fund altogether,
Yeah.
that would be beneficial as well.
When it sounds like there's some room, negotiate's not the right word, but to go back to them in terms of being like, hey, look at what we did. And actually from 18 to 19, we did this versus what you, so to just wipe that away.
Absolutely.
So it's easier to get rid of that.
Mhm.
That's good. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Dina? You're still muted, Dina.
Now you're muted.
There you go.
Okay. Kyle, can you speak again to the student activities? As you mentioned, that's been mentioned the last several years. I thought last year we really tried to put some more work towards that. And I thought it was my understanding, it was simply getting QuickBooks in there, getting everybody up to speed on its use. Where are we snagging the process?
So I would say that we're in a very good position right now. You described it perfectly. We have the processes up and running. There's a certain way that these student activity funds are dictated by Mass General Law, the way that they're supposed to be set up and the way that they're supposed to operate. We're in compliance with that component. Now it's more so of a best practice type thing where we have QuickBooks, we just need to get it fully up and running.
Okay.
I think the other piece of that took some time, Kyle, too, was there were accounts in there that we shouldn't have had in student activities, and it was a significant amount of work from the paperwork I saw to shift those to where they needed to be.
Oh, absolutely. And the reports that came out about, I think there were 2 different reports. It highlights all of that. And absolutely, the work that's been completed is significant.
And just to note, the management letter where it or comments on student activities, it's a positive comment. It's basically because it's not, I can't speak like an auditor, but until it's buttoned up and saying it's not an issue at all, it should remain in the letter. But as he states there, but overall the process is trending in a very positive manner. I think that should remain, their job is to point out any deficiencies, so it should remain there until we're all buttoned up and, then just maintaining a process.
Absolutely.
Any other questions on this?
I just want to add, Kyle, great job. Michelle's not here, but I just want to thank her for all of her previous work in getting this all kind of together and working through some of the issues that we were identified for last year that we don't hear in this report. So again, she's not here, but I just want to give a shout out to all of her efforts and everybody who supported her through that last year to get this
I'll
together.
second that as well. Reading through the reports, learning the lay of the land over the last couple months, it's very apparent all the progress that was made in the last few years with student activities here and the audit as a whole.
Thank you for bringing that up, Kim. That's an incredibly valid point because she did an amazing amount of work in 3 years here. So, yes,
absolutely,
for bringing that up. Massive kudos.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Questions? Trying to do the scan of the participants list and all the video windows. All right, seeing none. Kyle, what's the grand finale here? Do you have a?
Ta-da! I should have rehearsed something. I apologize.
Okay, it was last minute notice. I should have let you know. All right, excellent. So can I get a motion to, hang on a second, I have to find my agenda again. I know the verbiage. Can I get a motion to receive and file the fiscal year 19 audit financial statements, grant report, and management letter as presented, please?
So moved.
Was Maureen?
I'll second.
Second was Aaron? Okay. And any further discussion? I need a roll call vote, please. So I'll go down the list. Dina?
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Paul Goldner,
Yes.
Paulise,
Yes.
Deb? Deb? You there?
I'm trying to unmute
I
her
think
too.
she's still muted.
Yeah, there she is.
There she is.
Tina?
Back that mute button.
Yes.
And did I get you, Aaron? No, I don't think so, right? Did I get
You did. Yep.
I did, sorry. The windows shift and then I lose track of who I've done already. I need to just make a list and go down to the same one every time. All right, excellent. So that's unanimous. And now we need a roll call vote to move into executive session for the purpose of planning and conducting negotiations with union personnel, the Triton Regional Teachers Association, to return to open session with any information deemed ready for public notification.
I will make that motion. You need a motion.
I do need a motion. That's what I was just about to ask for. I was just reading down to make sure that I had the right language. All
My
right.
mute was, I was still open, so I thought I'd say it.
Thank you, Deb. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right. I need a roll call vote. So, Erin?
Yes. Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Paulise?
Yes.
Dina?
Yes.
And that's it, I think. Did I get Deb? Yes, I believe I did. All right. So Brian is going to turn host controls over to me and pause the video.
Yes.
Deb, Erin, and I are going to hang out here, or if you guys want to take a break, you're welcome to do that and keep this meeting open. For the rest of you, Brian sent you separate login information for the executive session. So you're going to actually log totally out of this meeting, or I'm going to kick you out of this meeting, one of the two. And
Wow.
and just to make sure that we're all clear. Yeah, hey, you're going to give me the host controls, right?
Wow. Maybe I should think twice before I hand this over.
Pick somebody else. And then you guys will rejoin us here in executive session or in open session rather, to complete the meeting afterward. So we'll see you all soon.
Oh, question from Paul? Or is that just a waiting?
Question. Is Kyle coming into our meeting?
He hasn't been in any others. He can?
I'd like him to.
Okay.
Right.
Very good.
Kyle, your first executive session. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'll take it.
Thank him. All right. So I am pausing.
Okay. All right. So back from our executive session where we discussed the negotiations with the TRTA, and I'm going to hand it over to Paul to recap what we discussed.
Okay. So we have come to school committee. We okay, Brian?
We lost you there for like 2 seconds. So just
Okay.
repeat what you said.
We have come to, we made a vote in executive session regarding a memorandum of understanding, which Brian has explained to us. And the high parts, or the highest point of the negotiation with the TRTA deals with compensation. We've agreed to increase their base salary in year one by 1.75%, and then in year two by 2%, and in year three by 2% as well. There are essentially 17 parts of the memorandum of understanding, and there are the compensation is important, but there are other areas that are very important too. I want the public to understand that it's not a matter of just talking about money. Just as a for instance, in the past during our extended school year, we would pay the people that were working with the SPED students $40 per day, $40 per hour, and that turned out to be much less than these people could make out in the free market. So one of the steps the Personnel and Negotiations Committee took was to increase the hourly pay for the OT and PT and speech language people so that it's consistent with what they make during the per diem during the school year. So the important part is that we're going to end up keeping those professionals working with our students during this school year for the extended school year. So that's the high part. And I guess, Brian, we also said that the MOU will become part of the public record. So
Yep.
If members of the public want to see, the gory details of each and every change, they're free to do that.
Yep.
Once it's approved.
Absolutely.
So I think at this point, we just want a roll call vote motion to approve the memorandum of understanding in public.
Yeah, so you want me to make the motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between the Triton Regional School Committee and the Triton Regional Teachers Association for the 2020 to 2023 contract?
I'll second that. Is there any discussion? Just a roll call vote.
All right, so we'll take a roll call vote. Dina?
Yes.
Paulise?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Paul Goldner? Paul Goldner, yes. Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Okay. Linda?
Yes.
And myself, I vote yes.
And the other three, I think you still have to call the other three of us, even though we have to abstain. We don't.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm sorry about that. Narissa?
Abstention. Yeah.
Deb?
Abstain.
And Aaron?
Abstain.
Okay.
It's just
Can
one
I
of the,
ask a question? Can I ask a question?
go ahead.
Doug.
Paul, you said that the $40 an hour wasn't up to market value, but did you say what it is going to become?
I think what Brian just said was it's going to become between $40 and $68 an hour. Brian, does that sound right? Depending upon what the professional earns on a per diem basis during
So
the
it's
year?
basically, right, so remember the contract year, so you just approved a 3-year agreement. That's actually September 1 of 20 through August 31st of 2023. So the rates that an individual working the summer program made the previous year, it would be that hourly rate. So if someone had a doctorate with 11 years of experience, obviously their rate would be much higher, and so forth. So it just becomes their actual per diem hourly rate rather than a flat $40 an hour.
Thank you.
Yep.
The only other thing I wanted to add was just to put a great shout out to the TRTA for working with them. There's a lot of meetings we had, a lot of good efforts by both sides, and obviously thank the people in the Personnel and Negotiation Committee, Dina Sullivan and Maureen Heffernan, and just for pulling it all together. Really appreciate it. And of course, Brian, for what you did as well.
And I just wanted to say thank you to the Personnel and Negotiations Committee, because it looks like you guys came up with some very creative ways of finding common ground.
Yeah, so I haven't seen the contract yet, but definitely thank you to the PNN, obviously, and Neil Harrington, who is the municipal representative. Yes, and obviously the administration and the TRTA, which I don't know if there are any other districts. I know there are districts that are hiring new superintendents during the closure, but I have not seen one yet that's actually negotiated or finished negotiating a contract during the closure. So I think that speaks to a lot on all sides, that this wasn't, let's table it or let's delay it. It was a let's keep on going and finish the work that we started. So
I was just going to say the same thing. That's the fact that any substantive long-term contract was settled during this closure. There are a lot of negotiations happening right now, and they're all to settle MOUs for the conditions during the closure. So that's what everyone's negotiating right now. So the fact that our TRTA didn't require an MOU for that and just stepped up to the plate as of Monday the 16th, right? It wasn't weeks later where you're hearing other places. They stepped up right away and jumped right in. And like I said, we've been meeting with them this week, at all the staff, and everyone has, Camille Visconti, who's the MTA rep, literally made that point to say, you have to understand, people aren't even settling how they're doing this closure, let alone a long-term contract. So that is no short task. So well done by everyone. Absolutely.
Right. So that is everything we had on our agenda tonight. Brian, I just did want to make one note, and my apologies to this because I should have double checked it. I just pulled it from my notes from that original meeting, but I've had a number of people pinging me that I checked while I was on the break because the full day PD day in the email that went out this afternoon is the wrong date. It should be Tuesday, November 3rd, and it actually says Tuesday, November 2nd. So my apologies. I took it straight from that meeting.
I'm sorry. As I was looking at your message and editing it, didn't even think about dates.
Yeah. So I don't know if I wrote it down wrong or it may have just not been clear in my handwriting, and I didn't
All
double
right.
check.
We can clarify that.
Thank you.
And just so you know, that calendar is posted online now too, so it's on the district website. And
okay.
I don't think anyone is paying attention to that right now.
Except the people who keep texting.
Except for one who's right. But they're not actually thinking about next year yet. They're just correcting.
No, I think it was more of a processing it to look at the calendar type of deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, excellent. Can I get so I should say we are not meeting again until May at this point. I closed my agenda. But this will be a play it by ear, I believe, sort of meeting, depending on what happens with the governor's decisions on closure. So, we'll keep in touch given that we're only technically closed until May 5th right now, or May 4th. And then we'll figure out what happens with meetings. You can keep making faces, Brian. Go ahead. We'll figure out what's happening with meetings once we hear more from the governor.
So just one thing to clarify. So for that May 13th meeting in regards to MOUs, so the one thing we do need to codify an MOU, and I've reviewed this with Paul, and we'll take this up. The PNN is meeting on April 30th to continue negotiations with IAs. And the one piece we do have to codify via an MOU with the teachers is how we're going to end this year's evaluation cycle. So I think it's not going to be a real long, hard discussion, but it is something the PNN needs to review and would be bringing that to the full committee on May 13th. So just to clarify, that is one thing that we need to button up, but I don't suspect that will be hard at all.
All right, perfect. Can I get a motion to adjourn then?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All right, excellent. I need a roll call vote to close the meeting then, please. Maureen?
Yes.
Dina?
Yes.
Paulise?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Ina?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So I'll talk to you all soon.